My name is Fletcher Grayson, and 10 days before my 30th birthday, I learned what my family truly thought of me. I was standing in the hallway of our Kenilworth mansion, a small gift box for my mother in my hand. From behind the slightly open door of my father's study, their voices spilled out, hushed, intense, like actors running lines. Then my mother's sharp, cruel laugh cut the air. "We'll announce the reading of the will right after the birthday toast. She'll be so furious she'll storm out and never come back." The perfect way to cut her from the family for good. My father's reply was calm, matter of fact. "All 250 guests will be there. She won't dare make a scene." My brother, Crew, gave a low chuckle. "Tell the videographer to get a close-up of her face. I want to see it clearly." I stopped breathing. The velvet box in my palm turned to lead. This wasn't just humiliation. This was a meticulously planned erasure, set for my own birthday, in front of everyone who mattered in Chicago. Without a sound, I retreated. I left the gift on the hall table, walked out to my car, and drove into the dark. In that quiet, cold moment, I made a decision. The surprise would be mine to give. If you've ever been betrayed by the people you called family, you know what comes next is a special kind of madness. Stick with me. To understand their cruelty, you have to see the perfect picture they presented. In Chicago, the name Grayson meant old money and new smiles. My father, Sinclair, built an empire of cosmetic dentistry clinics where a new grin could cost more than a luxury car. My mother, Helena, was the queen of North Shore charity circuits, capable of charming donations out of stone. My older brother, Crew, was the golden heir, a surgeon to the stars by 34. And me? My script was written before I could vote. Top grades, a prestigious pre-med track, then a neat slot in the family business. My father had a planner mapping my life to retirement. My mother had my wedding mood board ready. I was a character in their story, not a person with my own. I lasted one semester in organic chemistry before my soul screamed. The labs felt like a cage. The pre-med culture was a competition in exhaustion. Every family dinner was a discussion of square footage and insurance codes. So, one frozen February night, I broke from the script. While my classmates memorized formulas, I was studying floor plans and property listings. By dawn, I saw a different life, one built by me for me. 2 weeks later, I dropped out. I packed my car and drove home to tell them. The silence in our marble kitchen was absolute. My father set his espresso cup down so hard the china saucer snapped. My mother's smile stayed fixed, but her eyes went dead and cold. Crew just leaned against the counter, arms crossed, savoring the show. "You're throwing away a 7-figure future," my father stated, his voice flat. My mother's tone was softer, a velvet-wrapped knife. "People will talk, Fletcher. This reflects on all of us." Crew's smug snort was the final punctuation. "Hope that camera's worth sleeping on a friend's sofa." The consequences were swift and surgical. Within a month, every financial lifeline was severed. The trust fund, the car lease, the credit cards gone. My mother began leaving brochures for dental hygienist programs lying around, a passive-aggressive breadcrumb trail. My father had my name removed from the country club roster. I discovered it when a guard turned me away at the gate. At family dinners, I became a ghost. Conversations flowed around me as if I were empty space. They never yelled. Graysons don't raise their voices. They simply delete you. New photos on the mantle featured only 3 people. Christmas cards arrived signed by Sinclair, Helena, and Crew. When asked about me, my mother would offer a pitying tilt of her head. "Oh, Fletcher is still finding herself," she'd say, once while I stood 10 feet away with a plate of canapés no one offered me. She never looked in my direction. I learned the art of silence. I moved quietly, spoke minimally, covered up the physical marks of my new trade. Pushing back only made the vanishing happen faster. So I took my silence and the few $1,000s I'd saved, and I got to work. I rented a cramped apartment above a noisy bar in Edgewater and took every photography job I could get: corporate headshots, family portraits, bat mitzvahs, anything that paid. I worked until my vision blurred, reinvested every cent, and built a client list one shoot at a time. While my family waited for me to fail and come crawling back, I was laying the first, hidden stones of my own foundation. They thought I was disappearing. I was just going underground. The next 3 years were a blur of work, caffeine, and calculated risk. I lived on 18-hour days and serial dinners, pouring every cent back into better lenses, smarter ads, and a relentless hustle. That grind built a 6-month waiting list and bought me a loft studio in the trendy West Loop. My family never inquired about my work. Their assumption that I was perpetually one disaster away from begging for my old life was a delusion I was happy to let them keep. While they pictured me failing, I was laying the groundwork for something they could never imagine. The first year nearly broke me. I photographed a dozen weddings each weekend from spring through fall, edited footage until 3 a.m., and dragged myself awake before the city stirred. But the work spoke for itself. Brides told their planners, planners told venues, and my reputation grew. Soon, my one-room studio was too small. I faced a choice: rent more space and make another landlord rich, or become my own. I chose ownership. I formed an LLC called Lakeview Property Holdings, a name so bland it was invisible. I filed it in Delaware and hired a management firm to be its public face. My real name was on nothing. My accountant thought it was overly cautious. I knew it was perfect. 2 years later, my target appeared, a 6-story Beaux-Arts masterpiece on Chestnut Street, in the heart of Chicago's Gold Coast. It was where society weddings and million-dollar galas happened. The asking price was a number that would make most investors pause. But I hadn't bought a new car or a designer bag in years. Every profit dollar had been waiting for this moment. The math worked. I made a full cash offer and closed the deal before competing bids could even land. The building was more than a property, it was a sanctuary. The top floor had soaring 35-foot ceilings and pristine original moldings. North-facing windows poured in perfect, diffused light. The rooftop offered a panoramic view of Michigan Avenue. I transformed the 5th and 6th floors into the city's most sought-after photo studio and event space, a minimalist paradise with seamless backdrops, a gourmet catering kitchen, and a bridal suite so luxurious that fashion editors fought to book it. The lower floors I leased to elite wedding vendors who paid a premium just for the Chestnut Street address. Then came the irony, so delicious I could taste it. My father was searching for a new flagship location for Grayson Cosmetic Dentistry. My mother wanted a lavish studio to launch her high-end wedding planning brand. Their real estate agent, unknowingly, showed them my building. They adored the marble lobby, the gleaming brass elevators, the golden hour light. They signed a 15-year lease at an above-market rate, utterly convinced of their own good fortune. From that day forward, my mother boasted, "We've secured the most luxurious space on Chestnut Street, the jewel of the Gold Coast." My father plastered the address across all his marketing. My brother, Crew, used my rooftop for his new professional portraits. They hosted their annual elite client gala on my 6th floor, boasting to 400 guests that the Graysons now presided over Chicago's most coveted venue. They never once checked the public records. In their worldview, only a Grayson was capable of curating such perfection. The truth that their disowned daughter was their anonymous landlord was beyond their comprehension. Only one other person knew. Natalia Cortez, a razor-sharp commercial real estate attorney who became my best friend and my secret keeper. We met in a coffee shop when I was 25, editing photos on a cracked laptop. She asked what I did, and within 2 hours, we were strategic partners in all but name. Natalia handled every contract, every amendment, every piece of legal correspondence. She ensured all communication came from the sterile entity of Lakeview Property Holdings and never from me. Every quarter, I watched the automated deposits land in my account, Grayson Cosmetic Dentistry and Grayson Wedding Studio. I paid the building's taxes, approved its repairs, and collected their rent. And I said nothing. Their signature was on the lease, but the foundation beneath their feet was mine. I managed the building with detached precision. I paid taxes, fixed elevators, repaired leaks, and watched its value soar, all while my family claimed it as a trophy of their own status. By 29, the property was worth nearly triple my initial investment, and the waitlist for my studio stretched over 18 months. I could have sold, retired to an island, and vanished. But I didn't. There was a dark satisfaction in knowing that every one of my father's porcelain veneers, every one of my mother's lavish wedding consultations, every celebrity my brother sculpted, all of it happened under a roof owned by the daughter they'd erased. I told myself this secret knowledge would someday feel like enough. It never did. The quiet victory was cold. So I kept working, refining the building, perfecting the accounts, and letting their boasts grow more grandiose. The higher they built their fantasy on my foundation, the more devastating the truth would be. 10 days before my 30th birthday, the universe handed me the final piece of their blueprint. I'd finished a corporate shoot early and decided to swing by the Kenilworth house. I had a gift, a vintage enamel compact my mother had admired once in a magazine. Letting myself in through the side door, the silence of the mansion felt different. Then I heard them. Voices from my father's study, not the usual dry boardroom tone, but something charged, almost giddy. I moved down the hall, the gift box in hand, and stopped at the slightly open door. My mother was speaking in her polished, committee meeting cadence. The toast begins at 8 precisely. Sinclair will deliver the legacy speech. Then I'll introduce the reading of your father's will. Fletcher will be standing right by the cake. The timing is impeccable. My father's reply was smooth with satisfaction. Every major donor will be in attendance. The documents will be on the podium. When the terms are read, her options will be binary. Accept her disinheritance gracefully in front of 250 witnesses, or make a spectacle of herself. Crue's sharp laugh cut in. It's a checkmate. If she storms out, she confirmed she was never one of us. If she stays and takes it, she admits she's worth less. I've instructed the videographer to get a tight shot of her face the second they say her name isn't listed. My mother's voice took on a gloating edge. We'll take the new family portrait immediately after, just the three of us. The photographer will digitally remove her from any wider shots. By the end of the evening, the message will be clear to everyone. The Grayson legacy flows through Crew and his future heirs, not some dilettante with a camera. The compact box turned to ice in my hand. This wasn't just about money. They had weaponized my own birthday. The cake, the toast, the gathered elite, it was all stagecraft designed for a public execution. They were offering me a choice between two kinds of annihilation, silent complicity or explosive exile. My father's voice dropped, adopting his final deal tone. We've been too permissive. 8 years of her rebellion is enough. The 30th birthday is the definitive line. The Grayson name isn't a consolation prize, my mother added, her words soft and venomous. And if her temper finally makes her walk out for good? Problem solved. One less awkward conversation at Thanksgiving. Crew snorted. I'll have the photos tipped to the society columnists. Disinherited at her own gala. The headlines will do the work for us. They continued. Dissecting the logistics with chilling detail, podium placement, which pliant cousin would act as a witness, the dramatic pause after announcing my inheritance was now a scholarship in Crew's honor. Every word was a calculated cut. Their conversation then dissolved into derisive laughter, speculating I'd show up in denim and embarrass myself. I didn't make a sound. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum they were too self-absorbed to hear. Step by silent step, I retreated down the hall, the plush carpet swallowing any trace of my presence. In the grand foyer, I placed the tiny, ribbon-tied box on the console table beside the unopened mail. Then I walked out, closed the door softly behind me, and didn't look back. The gift, like my place in their family, was just for show. The real surprise was now mine to give. The drive was a numb, neon-soaked tunnel. I gripped the steering wheel, focusing on the physical pressure in my palms to anchor myself. Back at my apartment, I sat in the parked car, the dashboard clock ticking off the seconds. 10 days. A countdown to my own publicly funded character assassination. I didn't shed a tear. I didn't seek comfort. I opened my calendar and calculated the hours, converting shock into strategy. I didn't go to my apartment. I drove straight to the financial district, to Natalia's law firm. The high-rise was mostly dark. I texted her from the underground garage, I need the war room. Her reply was instant, a thumbs-up emoji and a 6-digit door code. When I stepped off the elevator on the 32nd floor, she was already in motion. The lights were bright, 2 laptops humming, a fresh pot of coffee brewing. She took one look at my frozen expression, my empty hands where a gift box should have been, and just nodded. No questions. I dropped into the chair across from her, pulled up the property management portal on my phone, and slid it across the desk. Natalia leaned in. Her eyes scanned the screen, clicking rapidly through payment histories. A low, sharp whistle escaped her. Fletcher. They're 4 months in arrears. 4 full months. She looked up, her professional composure giving way to sheer disbelief. This is a material default. With the escalation clause, if they miss the next cycle, the rent jumps 40%. I simply nodded. Their obsession with orchestrating my downfall had made them sloppy. They'd forgotten to pay the piper, and the piper was me. Natalia was already pulling the master lease from a secure digital vault, the very document she'd crafted years ago with meticulous, foresight-filled detail. We pored over every clause as if seeing them for the first time. The cure period was standard, 30 days to make good after formal notice. But the termination clause was a masterpiece of finality. Combined with the imminent, punitive rent hike, their non-payment was a legal gift. Her fingers became a blur on the keyboard, drafting with a prosecutor's precision. First, a notice of default, itemizing every missed payment with calculated, accruing interest. Then, the coup de grace, a notice of intent to terminate lease. It gave them 30 days from receipt to vacate my building entirely, clinic, wedding studio, everything. She appended a demand for immediate payment of all back rent, penalties, and fees, a total well into the 6 figures. Every page was branded with the sterile, anonymous letterhead of Lakeview Property Holdings. We worked through the night, a silent pact of focus. Around 3 a.m., we fueled on Thai food spread over the conference table, surrounded by printed records and annotated contracts. Natalia cross-referenced county title records, verifying the unbroken chain of ownership. She confirmed no signatures, but mine held any authority. She attached copies of the original lease, my discreet initials in the corner of every page. By 6 a.m., the weapon was assembled. 23 pages of cold, unassailable law. Notices, receipts, a full dossier for their attorneys. Natalia scheduled a commercial courier for personal, tracked delivery to my father's executive assistant first thing Monday morning. 9 days until the gala. The timing was surgical. She slid the thick, sealed manila envelope across the desk. It looked bureaucratic, mundane, but its weight was profound. Natalia held my gaze, her voice soft but firm in the dawn's quiet. Last off-ramp. We serve this Monday. They have a week of panic before the party. It might be cleaner. I didn't hesitate. They spent weeks choreographing my humiliation for a specific night, in front of a specific audience. I took the envelope. They get the reveal on their stage, in front of their crowd. We addressed the envelope in her flawless script, my mother's full name and title, and set it aside for the courier. We erased all evidence from the conference room, wiping whiteboards and recycling drafts. As we left, the city was just beginning to stir, pale light washing over the skyscrapers. Driving home toward the sunrise, the suffocating weight in my chest dissolved, replaced by a clear, glacial calm. 9 days. That was the span of their remaining illusion. The night of my 30th birthday, the Grayson estate was a vision of curated opulence. It glowed under a constellation of fairy lights, a confection of white tents and extravagant blooms. A string quartet provided the soundtrack as Chicago's elite, draped in black tie and jewels, floated across manicured lawns. It was a coronation of their legacy, and I was the scheduled sacrifice. I wore the navy gown Natalia insisted upon and positioned myself near the staircase, offering the world my most convincing replica of a smile, the same one I'd mastered through years of obligatory family portraits. Precisely at 8, my father raised his crystal tumbler. His speech on Grayson excellence and enduring legacy was a polished masterpiece, met with reverent applause. My brother, Crew, stood as his gleaming adjutant. My mother presided over the head table, a vision in gold silk, her hand resting possessively on the leather-bound will. The script was unfolding without a hitch. At 8:30, the spectacle of the cake arrived, 5 tiers of fondant and gold leaf. The room erupted in the birthday anthem, a forest of phone screens lighting up to capture it. I played my part, leaning forward to extinguish the candles, while my mother performed a delicate, photogenic dab at her eye. As the applause subsided, my father's voice cut through the merriment. Before dessert, he announced a pivotal family announcement. A hush of theatrical expectation fell. My cue. I vanished. A pivot through a side door, a swift descent down the terrace steps, and I disappeared into the shadowed garden. By the time my mother reached for the microphone to begin her own performance, I was sliding into the passenger seat of Natalia's car, idling at the service gate. Inside the mansion at 8:37 p.m., the scene they'd staged received an unscripted entrance. A courier in a tailored navy suit moved with purpose through the crowd. He bypassed the quartet and the ice sculptures, coming to a precise stop before my mother. He presented a thick, cream-colored envelope. The return address was stark, Lakeview Property Holdings. Urgent legal notification. With the reflexive grace of a hostess, my mother accepted it, offering a benign smile. To dismiss it would seem rude. Under the brilliant light of the chandelier, she slit the envelope open. The room's festive murmur died in an instant, replaced by a silence so deep you could hear the ice melt in a glass. All color drained from my mother's face. Her expertly applied lipstick became a garish slash on a suddenly bloodless canvas. She fumbled to close the flap, but my father's hand shot out, seizing the documents. "Give me that," he snapped, his composure cracking. He began to read aloud, his voice filling the void before his brain processed the words. Notice of lease default and termination. Premises: 111 Chestnut Street. Lessor: Lakeview Property Holdings LLC. Lessees: Grayson Cosmetic Dentistry LLC and Grayson Wedding Studio LLC. Required to vacate premises within 30 days. His voice hitched, then stopped dead. He had reached the signature line. He stared, unmoving. You could hear the ragged pull of his breath. Lessor: Fletcher Grayson. The sound of shattering crystal pierced the silence. One champagne flute, then another, hitting the marble floor. The phones, moments ago aimed at the cake, swiveled as one toward the head table. My mother emitted a choked gasp, her knuckles white where she gripped her chair. Crew took an aggressive step, but the courier had already dissolved into the crowd. My father was a frantic statue, flipping pages as if the text might rearrange itself. The documents detailed every missed payment, every penalty, the looming 40% rent hike, and the staggering 6-figure total due. The final page bore a stark, red-stamped notice of eviction and the promise of an immediate lock change. A stunned whisper from the front row rippled outward. Did that say, "Fletcher owns the building"? The whisper became a tsunami of hushed exclamations. Guests turned to one another, eyes wide, mouths agape. Someone held up a phone, filming vertically. The string quartet missed a cue, notes clashing discordantly before they simply stopped playing. "This is a mistake," my mother declared, her voice shrill and trembling as violently as the papers in her hand. "A clerical error." My father tried to reclaim the narrative, forcing his voice into a strained, managerial calm. "Our legal team will resolve this on Monday. Please enjoy the desserts." No one moved. The dessert tables stood untouched. Then, the buzzing began. Crew's phone vibrated against the tablecloth. Then my mother's. Then my father's. A symphony of frantic alerts. The clinic manager. The wedding studio director. The property management company. Each call was a dawning realization for the person on the other end. Their tenant was in default, and their true landlord was the disinherited daughter. A society reporter, invited for a flattering feature, now saw a better story. She shouldered forward. "Mrs. Grayson, can you confirm your daughter has served your businesses with an eviction notice tonight?" My mother's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. My father gripped her elbow, his own face a mask of ashen shock. Crew's eyes darted around the room, a frantic search for me, finally understanding I was not a pawn waiting in the wings. I was the unseen hand that had pulled the curtain down. The orchestra conductor, lost, raised his baton. No one noticed. The room was now a cacophony of excited gossip and clinking glasses. My name was on everyone's lips, a new and electrifying word. My mother's phone rang again. She answered with a desperate hope. It was not her lawyer. It was the building superintendent, calling to formally acknowledge the lock change order. Effective in 30 days. The phone slipped from her fingers. It struck the marble with a crack, skittering across the floor to land at the feet of a senator's horrified wife. The grand gala, the perfect execution meant to delete me from their story, had transformed in a single moment. It was now the night all of Chicago society witnessed the Graysons' empire crumble under the signature of the daughter they'd tried to erase. And I was miles away, watching the first blurry social media posts light up my silenced phone, not needing to be in the room to feel the seismic shift. The phone vibrated against my leg for 20 solid minutes. I stood on the porch of a quiet lake house in Geneva, the night air sharp with pine and damp earth. When I finally answered, her voice was a shattered thing. "Where the hell are you?" I let the silence stretch, long enough for her to hear the empty space on her end of the line. Then, my voice flat and clear, "Did you like the gift?" The dam broke. A torrent of ragged, furious words spilled out. "Fletcher, you will stop this right now. You are destroying everything. Call your lawyer, say it's a mistake. We'll pay. Name your price." "No," I said, the words simple and final. "Tonight, you demonstrated that the Grayson name has a price. Now you know exactly what it costs." A shift then, from fury to desperation, a pleading note that felt more performative than real. "Come back to the house. The people are still here. We can fix this." "You wanted an audience," I replied, the lake's black expanse mirroring the void in my chest. "You got one. Goodbye, Mom." I ended the call. Then, methodically, I blocked her number. I blocked my father's. I blocked Cruz. I scrolled through my contacts and blocked every Grayson, every cousin, every sycophantic family friend. I powered down the screen and looked out at the water. The ancient, suffocating weight was gone. In its place was a vast and quiet stillness. 2 months later, the law ran its course. At 6 a.m. on a bleak October morning, the property manager changed the locks on 111 Chestnut Street. My father stood on the sidewalk, his shouts muffled by the drizzle and the impassive stance of the sheriff's deputies guarding the door. Patients with 6-figure appointments found a chain and a printed notice. Brides in tears were turned away from a dark, empty studio. By 9 a.m., the headlines were brutal. Grayson Empire evicted by disowned daughter. Their downfall was a public feast. The clinic was relegated to a shabby office above a deli in Skokie fluorescent lights and stained carpet, a far cry from Italian marble. The wedding venture folded entirely. No one wanted scandal attached to their vows. My mother was quietly removed from charity boards. Invitations ceased. Cruz speaking engagements were canceled, his name now toxic. My father, predictably, sued. His lawyers flung every dramatic accusation they could conjure: fraud, duress, emotional torture. It lasted one hearing. Natalia stood beside me, a pillar in a graphite suit, as the judge reviewed the flawless lease and the undeniable default before dismissing the case summarily. My father kept his eyes on the polished wood of the defendant's table until the gavel fell. When he finally glanced up, for one fleeting second, I saw it. Not anger, not hatred. Pure, undiluted panic. 8 months later, the Kenilworth mansion was sold to cover their avalanche of legal and personal debt. I know the new owners painted over the family crest above the fireplace. The real estate listing photos found their way to my inbox. I deleted them unopened. I never went to another hearing. There was no need. The machinery I'd built operated on its own. The building's value continued to climb. I converted the upper floors into a creative residency, and now artists from across the globe fill those luminous spaces with new work, with beauty that has nothing to do with legacy and everything to do with creation. Walking through the lobby, hearing their energy echo in the space my family once claimed as their crown jewel, feels like the final, peaceful period at the end of a long, painful sentence. Occasionally, messages still trickle in forwarded pleas from distant relatives, inquiries from my mother's former charities, hollow gestures about reconciliation and propriety. I delete them unread. Some doors, once closed, must remain shut. The lesson I carry is straightforward. Never underestimate the quiet one. The person who stops arguing, who exits without a sound, who builds an empire in the silence others mistake for surrender. We are listening. We are remembering. And when the time is right, we don't need to make a scene. We simply change the locks. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story resonated with you, if it sparked anger, vindication, or a memory of your own, tell me in the comments. Were you ever the one everyone counted out? What did you build when you walked away? I read every one. If you know someone who needs to hear that sometimes the strongest move is a quiet exit, share this with them. I'll see you in the next story.